Hey guys, happy asynchronous day. Today we're going to be reviewing the 4 types of angles we talked about this week and what those angles mean. So the first one we're going to talk about is our vertical angles. So let's get started. There are 3 things we need to remember about vertical angles. They are usually the X-shaped angles. So whenever you see that X-shaped, think about the 2 V's, one on top of the other or side by side. We know that these guys are always congruent. Remember that word congruent means equal, or you can think about them having the same measure. That's what those vertical angles are good for. They are positioned opposite one another. And again, we can think of that as the word across. They are opposite and across. So 2 pictures that we might have here. We'll go with this first one, where it's that very nice X shape. It's 2 angles that are positioned exactly across from each other. Or you might have one like this, where it's a little bit skinnier. So there's not a ton of space here. Usually you're going to see them label our angles with like a 1, 2, a 3, and a 4, or maybe they'll letter them. Totally it means the same thing. So if I were to tell you, we'll switch colors here. If I were to tell you that angle 1 measures 30 degrees, well, we also know that angle 3 is also 30 degrees because they are opposite one another. If I told you that angle 2 was 150 degrees, we know that that means angle 4 is also 150 degrees because they are opposite one another. Anything opposite one another is equal and congruent. We can also work with the algebra side of things. So that's when we've got some letters and numbers paired in there. So the first one we've got is going to be 121 minus 8x on the top. And then we've got 40 plus x here on the bottom. Because these guys are opposite of one another, they are congruent, they are equal to one another. What we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to set them equal. So the first angle, which is 121 minus 8x, is equal to the second angle, which was 40 plus x. Now we're going to go ahead and solve this equation. We need to get all of the variables on one side and all of the constants on the other. So let's go ahead and get that 121 to the other side by subtracting 121 from both sides. Bring down that negative 8x. Bring down that positive x. And then 40 take away 121. That's going to give us a negative number, but that's perfectly fine. When we use our calculator to help us out, we get negative 81. All right, so now on this first side, all I have left is an x. I've done my job. Over here, I have an x that needs to move. The way I'm going to move it is by subtracting x. Subtracting x. Negative 8 take away 1 gives me negative 9x. Bring down my negative 81. And now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by negative 9 to get that x by itself. Divide by negative 9 to get x by itself. And in this case, I'm going to get x is equal to positive 9. Remember, we're not quite done here. We have to do one last thing, which is plug in that x value to find our 2 angle measures. So I'm going to say 121. Let me actually write it off to the side here so we can see it a little better. 121 minus 8 times 9. 8 times 9 means 121 minus 72. 121 minus 72, we'll use our calculator to help us out with that. Gave me 49. We can check the other one by saying, well, 40 plus our x value of 9, so 40 plus 9 did equal 49. Those 2 measures were equal, they were congruent, so we know we solved these problems right. Remember, guys, if you need to pause here so that way you can take some notes, you are welcome to do that at this time. What we are going to do is we're going to scoot on over and we're going to start talking about complementary angles. Complementary angles we'll do today in blue. These are always right angles. So if you see a right angle, you know it's complementary. You can look for the little boxes. So remember, look for the little box in the corner to tell you it's a right angle. That little box in the corner is going to be a great hint that something is 90 degrees. They are going to always add to 90 degrees. So they're always going to add to that 90 degrees. And you can kind of think about that L shape. Remember we said there's like this L shape and we can kind of turn it into like a C shape for complementary if you kind of turn your hand like that. So it's that L shape is complementary. So let's look at some examples. I'm going to draw you 3 examples here where first of all, I've got a right angle here. It's got that little box in the corner. And then there's an angle line that comes up and cuts it in half. Maybe it's going to look like this next one where I've got 2 angles that they are really, really close together like this. And they say somewhere that they're congruent angles. If we don't see the box, we can't assume. We have to test them or we have to be told that they are complementary. Or here's the one that a lot of students miss because they see that straight line and they think, oh, that's supplementary, but it's actually complementary because of that little box there. And then we've got these 2 angles that we're talking about over to the side. So some of the ways that you might see this question asked, in this case, maybe we've got one here that's 40 degrees and this one here that's 50 degrees. And they say to you, okay, are these complementary? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, 40 degrees plus 50 degrees, does that equal 90 degrees? Because that does equal 90 degrees, we know that this is a complementary pair. So yes, this is a complementary pair. We might ask you, well, here's a 1 angle measure. This is 60. Now find this angle right here. We'll call it angle A. So what you're going to say, well, 60 plus A has to add to equal 90. So now I'm going to subtract 60 from both sides. And I get that A is equal to 30 degrees. Or I might ask you the algebra way, like this one, where it's an X here and then X minus 16 here. I know that those still add to equal 90. So I'm going to say the X angle plus the X minus 16 angle has to add to equal 90. So the 2 angles adding to equal 90. I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms. I've got an X plus an X. That's like saying 1 apple plus 1 apple. Those together make 2 apples, or in this case, 2 X's. We bring down our 16 and our 90. To get the 2X by itself, I'm going to add 16 to both sides. And I get 2X is equal to 106. Last thing I'm going to do is divide by 2, and I get X is equal to 53. Very last thing I need to do to check my work, I know that this angle measure is 53 degrees because the X was by itself. This bottom one, I'm going to need to do 53 minus 16. Let me scoot that over so we can see it a little better. 53 minus 16. 53 minus 16 is 47. So this angle measures 47 degrees. Always remember, you're going to have to plug in if they give you a value like that, where it's an algebraic example. Remember, you are able to pause here and look at any of these examples you might need to. Let's keep going and let's look at supplementary angles. Supplementary angles, and we'll do this one in green today. Remember that S for supplementary means that it is a straight line angle. They make straight lines. They are always going to add to equal 90. I think I said 90, I meant 180. I was thinking back to those complementary angles. So supplementary always adds to equal 180. All right, so some ways you might see it. Maybe it's a straight line like this guy. Straight up and down line. with like a line that comes out, makes kind of this Y shape. That's an angle we might see. Maybe you're going to see two angles like this that are not connected, but they sure do look like a straight line. We can check them mathematically. We can't assume. And then this is why earlier I said the vertical angles were usually the X shape, because this one is still an X shape as well. But the difference here is we've got something like this, where it's like X and 3X minus 20. Because those two are talking about two angles on the same side, they're not opposite each other. The two angles we're talking about here would be vertical or supplementary angles. Those two would be supplementary. So let's start here in the middle. Let's pretend, like I said, though, this angle is 70 degrees and this angle is 110 degrees. How do we know that they are supplementary? How do we know for sure that they make a straight line? Well, we can say the 70-degree angle plus the 110-degree angle add to equal 180 degrees. Because the two of them add to equal 180 degrees, we know that this is in fact a supplementary pair. Over here looking at our Y shape, maybe I'm going to tell you that this angle is 80 degrees and this angle is 5x. Your job is going to be to solve for x. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to say, well, 5x and the angle that measures 80 degrees have to add to equal 180 together. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 80 to get that 5x by itself. And so now I've got 5x is equal to 100. I'm going to divide both sides here by 5, and I get x is equal to 20. So I know that that x measure is equal to 20. In order to solve, I'm going to have to say, well, 5 times 20, and that equals 100 degrees. So I know that that angle measures 100 degrees and that x equals 20. Remember, you've got to think carefully about what the question is asking you, because sometimes the question may ask you to find x, or it may ask you to find an angle measure. Make sure you're finding the right one. All right, so for the next one, they told us that this angle was angle x, and this one was 3x minus 20. So let's go ahead and figure it out. Remember, these are supplementary because they are on the same side of a straight line. If they were on different sides, or if they had been opposite each other, that's when they'd be something else. If they're the same side of a straight line, you can hear all those S sounds. That means it is supplementary. All right, so now we've got this X angle plus the other angle, which was 3X minus 20. The two of them have to add to equal 180 degrees. So now I can combine my like terms. I have an X plus a 3X. So 1 plus 3 gave me 4X total. And then we're just going to keep all of the other stuff the same. So a minus 20 equals 180. Now I'm going to go ahead and add 20 to both sides. That's going to get the 4x by itself. So now I'm left with 4x is equal to 200. And the last thing I'm going to do is divide by 4 in the hopes of getting x by itself. So for that one, I get x is equal to 50. Don't forget to go back and plug that in. So we know that this one that's just x is equal to 50 degrees. And then this one we're going to have to plug in. I'm kind of out of space here to do it, so I'm going to do it down here. It's 3x minus 20. We're going to plug in that x equals 50, so 3 times 50 minus 20. 3 times 50 is 150. Minus 20 would be 130 degrees. So I know that this angle measures 130 degrees. I know I did it right because 50-degree angle and 130 degrees add up together to make 180 degrees total. Don't forget, if you need to pause here so you can catch up on any notes, please feel free to do so. But the last one we're going to talk about is the easy one, because there's not really any math involved. This is just a look and find. So for this one, we will do purple. All right, so adjacent angles. Adjacent angles, like I said, have no rules for measurement. All the other ones we can figure out what the angle measures based on those rules. This one has no angle measurement rules. What we do know is that these angles have to overlap one of the sides. So one of the sides has to overlap, or they have to like touch each other. They have to be really, really close right up next to each other. So for instance, let's draw some pictures here. I've got this angle like this, and we know it's a right angle, and it's got this angle coming out in the middle. Because it has that angle coming out in the middle, we call this pair of angles adjacent. Let me see if I can spell adjacent right there. And because it can be more than one thing, this is adjacent and complementary. So it's both adjacent and complementary. Let's look at another example. If I have this like line here, this like straight line, and out comes this jut off to the side here. This one is making a straight line, and it would be adjacent because they share that middle ray. This is adjacent, and supplementary since it makes that straight line. It is both of them. Or we could have one that is just adjacent, where it's a shape like this. It's not a right angle, it's not a straight angle, but it still has a shared ray. This particular one down here at the bottom would be just adjacent. And you'll notice here, I did not draw any vertical angles because vertical angles cannot be adjacent. They are separate, they are opposite. Because they are opposite, they cannot be adjacent. All right, so let's take a quick minute and let's review what we talked about. Vertical angles are the V-shaped angles. They are always opposite one another, and we can solve them because they are equal, they are congruent. So when we create equations, we should put them separate, opposite each other, one on each side of the equal sign. Complementary angles are these guys that add to equal 90. They make this L shape. We can always look for that little box in the corner, and that's going to tell us that these are right angles. That means we're going to set them up where both angles are on the same side of the equation and they equal 90 degrees. Supplementary angles make a straight line. You can always look for that straight line in there, and that's how you know it's supplementary. These are going to add to equal 180. So we're going to put the math of both angles on one side, and we're going to set it equal to 180. They're going to be both on the same side and equal to 180. Adjacent angles are the ones that we can't set up equations for. We're just looking to see if they share a common ray in the middle. This first one has that common ray here that I've highlighted in blue, or this ray here that I've highlighted, or this ray here that I've highlighted. You can think about it like that. If that ray were to disappear, neither of the angles could exist, because that line is you need it for both angles. So if there is a line that you need for both angles, that's when they're adjacent. I hope this video helped remind you of your different angle pairs. You do have some homework tonight, so please make sure that you finish your homework and submit it. Have a great afternoon, and remember, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out.